100 of students, I guess, connected. So maybe we can start. Uh, Let me see if from the backstage I get any hint, or otherwise, I mean, we go. Ba, 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 ba. Okay. In the meantime, I got a message from an AI assistant monitoring this session. Interesting. Okay, yeah. Let's start. So thank you for again, once again, for accepting this invitation. It's really great to see you again. As we were previously saying, we say met each other at some point during my career back at Accenture when GenAI wasn't still there. But still, I mean, we were trying to understand how AI could be intervene as part of the design process or inside the design process, and what kind of changes um, at that point we were, say, trying to envision for the discipline and the practice itself. I, if you allow, I mean, if you allow me, I will skip altogether the standard introduction with bio and stuff, because I mean, who received the invitation already saw that, and I will leave the stage to you so we can say make the most out of the 1 hour we have. I'll be in the backstage taking notes for the Q&A session, and also to basically manage questions from the audience. For whatever things you need, I mean, I'm here also to assist you. So the stage is yours.
Awesome. All right, I'm gonna share my screen, and hopefully you can tell me if it's not coming through. Is this working?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. So I'm very excited to be here today to talk about the work we've been doing on how to design for AI. And we generally refer to this as closing the innovation gap, because things are not working well right this second. So just a little about myself. I actually started my career in film and television production. And then I started selling computers as a way of paying for my very expensive hobby. I joined Philips to start doing some work on interactive television, which they were really interested in. It never really became anything, but for me, that was a transition from being a practitioner to being a researcher. And then I've spent 12 years as a professor joint between a school of design and a school of computer science. But for the last 12 years, I've moved my appointment entirely into computer science, even though I'm totally not a computer scientist. I am a user experience and service designer. Here's an image of the very first AI system I worked on back when I was at Philips. This was a TV show recommender back when Xena Warrior Princess was a first run TV show. I've worked on a bunch of fun projects since then. One of my favorites is the person place time view. It's a system that learns where and when everyone a family is going to be and which parents are responsible to take kids to different activities. And what it looks for is, when is there a child that probably should be getting picked up by a parent, but no parent is heading for the child. So it's like a smoke detector for forgetting your kids. I've done a fair amount of work in healthcare. This is an interface for a decision support tool to help cardiologists know when to implant a mechanical heart. The main challenge here is when you're confident enough to reach into someone's body and replace their heart with a little propeller, you really don't think you need help from AI. So how do we situate this in an environment where it's helpful but not distracting to clinicians? Another fun project, we were looking at how people are losing their material possessions and gaining a bunch of virtual possessions. So we built a smart teenage bedroom of the future that redecorates. So if your friend comes over, it shows what you have in common with your friend. If your mom comes in, it shows her the bedroom you want your mom to think you have. I did one of the first real-time arrival systems for our local transit service, a system to detect the onset of major depression. And then some of the work that I'm doing now, we're looking at older adults who are just starting to develop mild cognitive impairment and early stage dementia. And we're asking, can computer agents providing cognitive support keep them in their homes longer, which is where the older adults want to be, but it's also much cheaper than putting them in expensive memory care. In doing, like, just designing a whole bunch of systems over a number of years, myself and my team have noticed this trend. We call it missed low-hanging fruit. So there's lots of opportunities for really simple AI that don't happen, and this became a curiosity for us. So I'll start with just an example from Starbucks. I'm guessing you're familiar with Starbucks. Starbucks has a mobile app that allows you to buy coffee in stores. It uses a gift card model, at least in the US, which is great for Starbucks because they get your money way before you get the coffee. In addition, the app recharges about every 25 euros. So Starbucks avoids a bunch of credit card fees when people use the app. And it's interesting to us that Starbucks really wants people to use the app. They've got a world-class UX design team, but the app never infers which customers use this to pay, and it never lands those customers on the Pay tab when they launch the app inside of a Starbucks. So not a difficult inference to make and totally in line with removing friction. But why do teams not seem to notice? Another example, I'm sure you're familiar with Instagram. Instagram makes money when influencers post, because their posts attract a lot of eyeballs that consume ads and generate revenue. It's curious for us at a company with the best data scientists and the best UX designers in the world. The app never learns which tags influencers always use. And so every time an influencer posts, they have to type the same tags in over and over and over again. So why are they leaving this unnecessary friction that reduces the number of posts influencers make? It's not all in the app space. A number of car companies are starting to market self-parking cars. And this is a feature desired by a tiny number of people who live in the suburbs and are afraid to drive in the city because they'd have to parallel park. That's not really a large enough group to be a market. This is a very difficult feature to deliver. You have to sense that the parking space is big enough. You have to tie into the steering, braking, transmission, and acceleration. You have to develop a plan for how to achieve parking, and then you have to measure against that plan to see if the car is actually doing a good job of parking. So it's a really expensive and difficult feature for almost no audience. And what's curious to us, like the sensors to just detect, is the space big enough, are already on cars. It'd be basically free for a car company to offer that today. And that would be valued by anyone driving in an urban environment. They could definitely charge you more for that feature at no cost. But for some reason, they're choosing to work on difficult things, not valuable things. And so about maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I started growing a new line of research. Instead of just making AI things, we really wanted to understand what is the process and are there opportunities to improve the process by really bringing in design thinking. And we sort of talk about this as, how do we begin to think of AI as a design material so that we can more effectively play and push products and services into the world. I'm going to start with a perspective on AI, which by the end of the talk, you may say, you don't actually think that. But I want to just say, I actually think AI is super amazing. And so I'm going to start with some examples that I think are truly amazing. These are the Kiva robots. Amazon uses them in their warehouse. The robots drive all over the place. They drive under the shelves. And when they spin, they get taller and they lift the shelf up. And there's a person called a picker who packs the boxes. And the idea is every time they reach, the item that they need is right there. That it becomes super efficient. And the robots decide where everything goes. So while people would put all the red sweaters in one place, the robots put the red sweaters all over the place to optimize the fact that that next shelf that pulls up has exactly what the picker needs. And it's created this world where there's a machine side with no humans, and then the one human that's sort of at that boundary. This has worked so well for Amazon. They bought this company and now prevent anyone else in the world from using this technology. Another great example I love, Airbnb predicts what's the maximum a host can charge and still rent their space. And to me, this is CEO level insights available to anyone. We're all just doing this with simple inferences from high quality data. Another place that's been transformative is predictive analytics in farming. This has really increased crop yields, reduced use of resources, and reduced pollution. So amazing when you sort of can apply AI in consistent ways and where you find sort of social and economic value that can be combined together. And then I'm sure you're familiar, November of 2022, ChatGPT came out, really gave us commercially available Gen AI and foundation models. And this has been transformative and tremendously disruptive. So when I talk about AI, I don't just mean Gen AI, I'm talking about sort of the whole bandwidth of AI from predictive to agentic. But I really think of more use cases. So I mean everything from a spam filter to diagnosing cancer, from generating best routes to discovering new drugs. What pulls this all together is this issue of uncertainty for a designer. Whenever I'm making something, I never know if I can actually make it, and I never know what kinds of errors it will make. And that's the challenge. How do you work in a space where that's always your reality? And so my team's been doing a bunch of different work to try to get a handle on the AI innovation process. So one of the things we've done, most obvious, we just went out and hung out with people like Giovanni, fits in here, who are expert at doing this. So we hung out at places like Google, Meta, Philips, Accenture, and just looked at like who's good at this, what do they do? We've been looking at like what are the resources they use, what are the processes they use, and then we've tried to create new resources, new processes, and new tools by bringing those ideas from across a whole bunch of organizations. And then the last thing we did was create a course on how to design AI products and services where we test out new ideas we have for how we think we can do this better. And this is an interdisciplinary course that mixes business students, technical students, and design students. And I just want to share a few insights about what we've learned about designing for AI. So we see a tremendous amount of success, and this implies that we have actually a really robust innovation process, but that's not true. If you look back at predictive AI, so kind of everything before 2022, everyone was talking about an 85% failure rate for AI projects. They just fail at a really high rate, much higher than other innovation processes. And since the emergence of Gen AI, things maybe have gotten even worse. So a study from MIT that came out this summer says 95% of generative AI pilots are failing to achieve a return on investment. But what's interesting is sort of what's happening in the business world. You're seeing CEOs, so in this case, 37%, according to IBM, are saying it's better to do something quickly and have it fail than to do something that is effective. And so it also suggests, like, what is the value of an AI system for the enterprise? It might not just be transactional. So the literature shows us 4 main failure points. One is you just can't ever achieve the model performance you need to make a viable product. Another is that your costs will never exceed the benefits. Third is that this doesn't solve a user's actual problem, so they're never going to adopt and use. And then we have ethical failure, where AI is creating unintended harm, and the harm really outweighs whatever benefits it's generating. And in thinking about this and in reflecting across all the different processes we've seen, what we expect is that there's actually really no or poor quality ideation, and this is driving enterprises to choose the wrong thing. And I want to sort of spend a little bit of time to really unpack, like, why are they so bad at choosing the right thing to make? So when we talk to companies, what we repeatedly hear is our data science teams envision services customers don't want, and our managers and design teams envision services that can't be built. And for us, that's the gap. How do we cross those? How do we begin to envision things customers want that are buildable? What is that process? We recently completed a study on what we call AI deciders. So these are the managers that approve AI projects. And what we saw was pretty much no ideation. So the managers only consider one concept at a time, and then they say yes or no. They're not using collective intelligence. So you have technical teams suggesting things, design teams suggesting things, domain experts suggesting things, and then managers making suggestions, but none of those groups are working together. In the US, and this might be a very US-centric view, in the United States, about 6% of people, and these are all men, believe they could win in a fight against a grizzly bear. Right? It's ridiculous. This is an 800-pound animal with giant claws. But I think that 6% are all managers approving AI projects. The level of magic bullet thinking that we've seen, the hype and we say FOMO, the fear of missing out, is just seems to be driving terrible decision making. One of the managers we spoke with shared that they were going to replace their accountants with an LLM. And it's like, that is a truly terrible idea. We are not anywhere near that level of performance. What we see is that UX is joining too late. So in general, there's a decision of what to make, and then you bring UX on. And so I started as a designer before we called it UX, but in the 90s. And at that time, we were always brought on after the terrible decision of what to make had already happened. And they're like, can you put a pretty interface on this? And we called that putting lipstick on the pig. It didn't work. This is why we have UX design. But for some reason, like now that AI has come in, we've returned to this terrible way of working. The people more in the driver's seat now are data scientists. And if you look at how data scientists are trained, they are never trained to ideate. It's just not a part of their process. So the first step in a data science process is problem formulation. It's generally like 1 or 2 paragraphs in a textbook, which is find an interesting problem. And then the majority of the focus is all on how do you do model building. But they don't ideate and they don't understand the value of doing it. Another big challenge is no one knows what anything costs. So it's easy to propose truly ridiculous things. So if you think about architecture, if you went to an architect and you said, I have 100 million euros, they could tell you what they could build. You can get a building this size, we can use glass, steel, concrete. It'll support these kinds of activities. It'll take this long to build. And then they can actually build it and it will be in that cost. If you go to a data science team and you tell them you have 100 million euros, the only thing they can guarantee is that they can spend your 100 million euros, right? There's just this tremendous amount of uncertainty. And our methods are all based on an intuitive understanding of cost. That simply doesn't work when you're working in the AI space. Possibly the biggest problem is that non-AI people tend to think of AI as a superhuman intelligence. And I think this is largely driven by the media, who love clickbait stories like Target knows teens pregnant before parents. AI outperforms doctors in diagnosing cancer. Google engineer says chatbot sentient. None of these are true. There's a thin aspect of truth, but they are all tremendously misleading on what AI can realistically do. And the consequence of that, when non-AI people get together and try to think about what to make, is they tend to only think about really difficult tasks where you need great expertise and you need nearly perfect model performance to create value. And so the majority of your opportunity space is simply never considered. You're just basically focusing on the unbuildable things. IBM's done some great work really understanding data science as like a new discipline in the organization. And they've noticed that the data scientists really struggle to communicate what it is they do, how they work, and particularly around this concept of model performance. So they'll come at a group of managers and say, oh, we can get model performance to 90%. Is that good enough? Well, 90% in the US is like, that's an A minus. Is that good enough? Seems pretty good. If you think about automatic speech recognition, most sentences have about 14 words. So at 90%, roughly one or a little more than one word in every sentence will be wrong. Is that good enough? It depends on the application. If I'm transcribing a court case where words matter, it is nowhere near good enough. But if I'm transcribing a voicemail so you don't have to listen to it, you can get plenty of context from a poorly transcribed message. So how are we starting to tune ourselves to the situation where you don't need perfect model performance? How do we recognize those things? Data scientists are typically trained by researchers. Researchers are rewarded for working on hard problems. And so they leave school with a harder is better mindset. And it's really a struggle for them to understand valuable as better and valuable as what's valuable to the enterprise, which is often what's valuable to our customers. Design really struggles in this space also with the idea of understanding what can I reasonably ask AI to do. And there's a distinction that's important here between mechanisms and capabilities. Mechanisms is how AI makes an inference. Capabilities are what can I actually do with an inference. Just to pull in a little design theory, if you're familiar with Donald Schoen's concept of reflection in action, which is that creative moment where the idea sort of comes out of you, in order to do this, you need a lot of tacit knowledge. And Schoen used the metaphor of the jazz musician who knows their instrument so well they can create music while playing music, right? So it's like we have to understand the materials. And so we send students into the studio and the shop to gain that felt understanding, but that's very hard to do with AI. In addition, almost all taxonomies and discussion of AI are mechanistic. They discuss how an inference is made, not what can I do with an inference, not where is this valuable. Another big barrier is that user-centered design, which has been the main process used in technology, certainly in software, does not work. And we've had to run into this wall repeatedly to really learn. It simply doesn't work. So design teams really struggle because they keep trying to force fit user-centered design to a process that's just not going to support it. AI innovation starts at the center of the double diamond. It always starts with the decision of what to make. If you do user-centered design, what you typically do, you go out and you pre-decide who the customer is going to be, you study them, you notice some pain points, some opportunities, you draw a focus on, oh, if we could work on these, this would be transformative. This would be a huge opportunity. The problem with that approach is it almost never aligns with where AI can actually deliver value. So like you'll find real problems, they're just not AI opportunities. So the question really is, how do you co-find the intersection of an AI opportunity and a user need? When we force user-centered design, you really turn your innovation team into hammers because you've predetermined this is an AI innovation process. My solution must be AI. And then you apply it to a bunch of ridiculous problems where it's not going to help. In our work with professionals, really looking at the experts at doing this, what we noticed were the people that are really, really good at coming up with AI concepts for products and services have internalized a bunch of abstractions of AI capabilities. And they have a bunch of examples they can use to explain that. In addition, we really see magic when design is co-located with AI, where they sit together and have codependencies for delivering. So I want to talk about some of the advances that we've made. So we became kind of obsessed with this idea of capabilities. We spent 3 years building a taxonomy of AI capabilities. This is older, so this is like predictive AI. We distilled these down to these 8 high-level concepts, and then we built a brainstorming kit that sensitizes design teams to these capabilities. And then we ran sessions to see like how much will this improve their ability to come up with awesome new products and services. And what we found was this was a total failure. This did not work at all. So the designers could draw on a larger range of AI capabilities, but they still pretty much always produced ideas that were unbuildable. And it's sort of like, why did that not solve the problem? So we cast around a bit to really try to understand the situation. And we came across this metaphor from Google. So that's Casey Korzakov. She used to be the chief decision scientist at Google. She taught a course called Making Friends with Machine Learning to onboard Google's teams to find valuable AI use cases. And she said, you need to think of AI as an island full of drunk people. It's amazingly fast and can handle an inhuman quantity of data because there are lots of drunk people. But it is not very smart. It's not particularly clever. So where do you need speed? Where do you need scale? But you don't need a lot of intelligence. So we went back and we were thinking about our taxonomy where we'd sort of broken down these 40 AI features, and we mapped them to what we call the task expertise model performance matrix. And so this is like, how hard is this task for a human? How well does the model need to perform before a user experiences value? And what was interesting, so from our 40 features, 25 of them, so more than half, created value for users with only moderate performance. And this kind of got us thinking, we're really good at building mediocre AI. So instead of like wishfully hoping we could make AI better, maybe we should be getting better at noticing where moderate model performance creates value. How do we shift our thinking in that space? And so, to kind of take an extreme example, we did some work in the ICU, really focused on how might we use mediocre AI in the ICU in a way that creates value but doesn't create additional risk. So we did sort of normal things. We did brainstorming. Interestingly, the data science team we worked with that was expert at ICU data, and the ICU doctors and nurses, none of them had ever brainstormed before. So the designers were there not really to come up with ideas, but to really scaffold these two groups of experts at finding the intersection of their knowledge. And then after the session, we took their ideas and we put them on an impact effort matrix. And what we saw is almost everything was going to be ridiculously difficult to build, and only about half of the ideas were valuable. So we got them to brainstorm, but they didn't brainstorm well. So then we shifted the way we worked when we brainstormed, and we started to sensitize teams to ideas of very simple AI, like spam filters. It's a two-class classifier, takes a collection of documents and sorts them into two piles. That's all it's doing. And to situations where moderate model performance creates value. Things like step counters. They don't need to be super accurate as long as I can tell if I'm taking more or less. The actual number is kind of unimportant. And we ran this brainstorming again after resensitizing and got a really different result. Now, pretty much all of the ideas were valuable and half of them were easy to build. And so for us, that's that sweet spot. We're looking for this, where can I get high value, low risk opportunities? So to characterize this a little, when we first started talking to the ICU doctors, they're like, can you help us with sedation? We'll put a patient on a mechanical ventilator, we put a tube in their throat, so we sedate them so they don't pull the tubes out. Everybody's different. If we give too much sedation, they get delirium, develop PTSD, and have long-term psychological harm. If we don't give them enough sedation, then they're in pain, they have anxiety, and they don't heal well. And we said, that is a really difficult problem. We are totally not going to work on that. While that is a real user need, it is not an AI opportunity because the quality of their data is terrible. But we had talked to them about demand prediction. So demand prediction is basically just predicting what you think customers will buy. So Amazon predicts at Christmas time, people will buy Christmas lights. So it pre-ships those to warehouses. So when a customer orders it, it just has a small distance to travel. And what was fascinating for us is when we talked about demand prediction, the ICU clinician said, we can use that. And we were shocked. It's like, how would you ever use demand prediction in the ICU? This seems like a ridiculous technology example. And they said, oh, we order meds for our patients every day. They're really sick, but it can take 3 to 6 hours for the drugs to come from the pharmacy. In addition, the nurses are ridiculously busy, but they're way more efficient if they give the patient all the drugs at once as opposed to one at a time as they come in from the pharmacy. We could look what's wrong with the people in the ICU today. What drugs have we traditionally given them the next day? We're going to pre-order those. And if we're wrong, then we just order drugs from the pharmacy. So you can get an operational gain with no additional risk. And that for us was fascinating to see sort of the effectiveness. We've tried this brainstorming sprint with a whole bunch of industry partners, insurance companies, news companies, software security companies, auditing and accounting companies, and it's been hugely successful because it's really blending technology-centered and user-centered design, and it's really doing it in a pre-agile way to get you into that space of finding better ideas to choose from before deciding what to build. We've been continuing this line of work. We've been digging in to get capabilities for Gen AI, but also looking at that expertise model performance space. And Gen AI space is a little different. It's a little more on the good, not just moderate, but nothing, absolutely nothing in excellent model performance. So to some degree, it's a much more narrow band. And it still means we need to sensitize ourselves for looking in the right space. We've been doing some work to see if we can recognize responsible AI issues at the concept stage before any model building happens, and that's worked pretty well. We've developed new tools for doing concept assessment and selection. So right now, like most designers use things like dot voting, which isn't particularly sophisticated, or engineers use these like pew charts to weigh trade-offs. We developed a pretty simple tool that helps people take a business perspective, a technology risks perspective, a user acceptance perspective, and an ethical perspective. And using this tool, we found interdisciplinary teams could review 10 concepts in 60 minutes with great consistency. We've also been doing some work looking at AI literacy, particularly at managers who have to make the decisions about what to build. And this has been fascinating. This is kind of the line of work that's blossoming the most right now. So I'm going to sort of pause it here and just pass on a few recommendations for those of you interested in sort of moving into the space of not really designing with AI, but designing for AI. How do I think about new kinds of things I might want to put into the world? So some thoughts for designers. First, spend some time really learning as much as you can about AI capabilities. We need to have the language in order to be able to collaborate with the data scientists and to have a reasonable set of expectations of learning concepts like model performance, like what do we need to make things work. It's shifting a focus. So designers often want to work on consumer products, which are much in a desire space, but the opportunity for AI is much more business to business. Really a need to embrace service design and value co-creation, because that thinking about revenue while also thinking about usefulness simultaneously is super important, because it's those spaces where projects are failing. There's a need to move towards collective ideation where you're bringing in technical people, business people, design people, and domain experts. And it's a change for designers when you ideate like this, because now you facilitate. You're not the person coming up with the idea. It's a different role. Same with assessing concepts, bringing those expertise together. Really think about, can you estimate the return on investment? Can you understand the benefits? Can you estimate the costs? And can you say, can this thing ever make more than it's going to cost to build and to run before you build, as opposed to after you build? And then really shift towards this focus on low-hanging fruit. What are the low-risk, high-value concepts that are being overlooked today? All right, that's it for me. Thank my funders, National Science Foundation, National Institute of Health, Center for Machine Learning and Health, Accenture, and Bloomberg. So with that, I'm very happy to take any questions.
Let's see if you have any questions coming. So feel free to use the chat. We're gonna read through the questions as they pop out. Particularly my students that I saw them joining this session, since we are actually working on AI and products on a B2C sort of setup. There's still a lot to process, but it's also a very great opportunity to you know, to advance your effort to get, to say, some interesting insights
Yeah.
for the project. So don't be shy. So let's make the most out of these sessions as usual. Let me see. Let me see.
I'm curious for the students, because my students struggle with this. No one's ever asked them when they come up with a project, who's going to pay for that? And how do you know they will pay what it costs? It's, yeah, generally a new requirement that's just not a part of most design education.
Yeah, usually something that you don't consider that often, particularly say in an educational environment. So that's not necessarily coming into consideration that often. But that's an excellent question for sure.
We still work in highly siloed ways, but I think designers have done a better job of collaborating with engineers, the technical. We've not done nearly as good a job of doing that same thing with the business side. But so to me, what's this new kind of collaboration that's all three at the same time is new, and we're still figuring it out.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with that. So even in looking at my say specific experience, so that's something that we are still, let's say, in the process of learning. But even the collaboration with engineers, it has improved a lot. But even we have to make progress even in that sense, on that side of the collaboration itself. I see a question. Let me see. So from Ilke, I'm gonna read it. When designers shift from idea makers to facilitators in AI projects, how can they maintain real decision-making power?
Designers don't have real decision-making power, so the idea that you're maintaining it is ridiculous. Decisions are made at the executive level. Like, the people with the resources to greenlight a project are always in charge. We don't like to, like, so there was a whole movement of like, oh, we need more design centered. It's like, that's a terrible idea. Designers don't have credibility in the enterprise. But if we learn the language of business and technical, we will have considerably more influence. And particularly for things like responsible AI, by being in the position of working on projects that actually get into market, you will have way more influence, but you don't need to champion it out loud, right? Make it a part of the criteria of choosing what's going to get made. So a lot of the terrible ideas get filtered out. That's the influence that you get, but designers are just not going to be in charge in such a highly technical, heavy cost space.
Isn't that coming out from this say public debate, if you want to say so, or this idea that designers should, say, have a seat at the table? I have no idea what the table is going to look like, what this table is, but this idea that, yeah, you should be more influent, you should have more impact on at the C level and stuff, which is in a way a controversial idea, I guess. I've also experienced that. So I tend to agree with this idea that probably that's not something that we have to to achieve at all. But again, any other question? Let me see. Let me see. Let me repeat myself. So don't be shy, don't miss the opportunity. So we went through a lot, of course. I mean, and we need time to digest it. Probably may rewatch the video later on, but don't miss the opportunity. So there is another interesting one. So you think designers won't be essential in the near future?
No, I think designers are super essential, but our superpower, while before it was really envisionment, our new and maybe more important superpower is systemic thinking and facilitation, to be the glue that brings the other stakeholders together to hold people accountable for a good creative process. Like we're the experts at making sure you do an effective ideation, that you're really getting good coverage. People don't get lazy and sort of just move on to whatever they want next, and really be the drivers, the creative drivers in a space that has very little creativity. And I don't see AI replacing the designers that do that role. It's a social role. You're trying to be credible, but you're not trying to be the boss of these other people.
In educational environment, how do you teach that? How do you achieve that the level of confidence in students? So you're part of design school, you're learning design, but how do you also construct or design, let's say, a program to have that in place as well? So the facilitation part. When, I mean, you're working with students that are still part of a design school, so designers themselves, so they don't get this exposition to other backgrounds, to other skills, other perspectives, other points of view, other agendas, let's say so.
Yeah, so this is where I've been very lucky with the class that I teach. I'm in a school of computer science, even though I'm a designer, right? So they're trying to create these spaces. We call ourselves envoys, like I'm a designer in a non-design space, right? That's a way, but creating classes that count. So designers can take it as a design count, can get design credit. Computer scientists can get computer science credit. Business students, mostly they're product management students, can get business credit. But we're giving them challenges, and we co-teach it because no one instructor has enough range. And so being forced to have that interdisciplinary experience, where like, oh, we're in the brainstorming phase, you really are now responsible for getting your teammates to actually brainstorm, right? And they're resistant because it's not how they work. They just want to be told what to build. It's like, yeah, that's not the assignment. We've had great luck doing that, and I think our students have had great success at leaping into industry because they've had that cross training. IDEO used to call this T-shaped people, right? You have breadth knowledge. I understand some business. I understand some engineering, not a lot, but I'm deep in design and in how to do it, but also how to facilitate it. And so I think that's an old idea, but being T-shaped and classes that are giving people that experience is super helpful.
Yeah, I have my fair, let's say, a share of experience when it comes to designing modules, I mean, with the sort of mindset. But I was saying there's also some resistance from students because they are expecting, they see that as not really related to the design or to the learning experience related to designers. That is not part of the design itself, which is a bit of a tricky, let's say, again, conversation to have. But I tend to agree also to what you were sharing. I mean, according to what I also see in class. So we have 4 more questions. I hope I'm not missing anyone else. So I go with this one. So what risks arise when AI systems are designed without enough human oversight or interference? And who should be held accountable if AI systems or designs cause harm?
You were asking an excellent question, but it's not design's question. That these are fundamentally policy questions about accountability. And I feel like designers have great passion, and they often want to work on the ethical components, but they actually lack the knowledge. They're not lawyers. Like it's a whole, and I've done a bunch of work with lawyers and ethicists and policy people, which helped me understand my own naivete of really thinking about this. And so again, I think those are other disciplines. When you're at the later stage, when you've decided what to make, how do you do it? Designers, I think, are more effective at thinking about policy at like company policy versus national policy because we don't have the attention span to work on a 5-year campaign to change a law, right? We do very short interactions with clients. Yeah, it's sort of like we're not very good at engineering optimization, right? Like that's just the math part. I don't need to be in the building. I'm just disruptive. And so I think again, understanding you're raising a big issue, but it's not one that design's really going to add much to.
Okay, so Shelley is asking, so we hear a lot about how product managers are taking over design roles. Have you seen that trend in your research as well?
Yes, but I think this is a phase we're going through. It's super mediocre. So if you're looking at applications that need super mediocre design, that will be automatable. But where you actually need people that like are creative, and that there's this, I don't know if you lived through this, so you're all too young, but when I was coming of age in design and computing, desktop publishing was just happening. And you had a bunch of tools that came out that let just anyone now create a graphic design, and they were terrible because they hadn't gone through 4 years of typography training, just like paying attention to the little details that matter. Typographers did not get destroyed by that. It took a long time, though, for people to realize making mediocre things is ineffective. So we're going to have to suffer until the enterprise and the other organizations discover that the slop that AI pushes out is not really effectively replacing skilled designers. I'm not worried. I work in this stuff all the time. Like,
so Vishal, but I don't know if it's really a follow-up question. So he's asking, so we need to be think more creatively rather than being effective because AI can do that for us, right? I don't know if it's really a follow-up question. Yeah.
I think like a way to think about it. So design does often a lot of research to understand a context, because an individual designer doesn't know all of the different things people do. But AI actually has a super broad understanding of all the things people do, but it's a really mediocre understanding. So I think for designers, can we use AI to learn a lot of just the obvious to anyone that's involved in this activity really fast, so when I go in to do field work, I'm much more targeted at the nuanced area where design's going to add its most value. So I think this can make us better. It'll, in the same way like the Avid, it certainly made video editing and film editing much faster, but it also made it more creative because you had more time to try things. And I think there is an actual opportunity, but it's delayed. You have to wait for some die-off. But there will be a moment that this is actually going to help us be a little more explorative. And in the same way we like learn to work with paper and ink, we're going to learn to work with AI through the AI that's helping us make things.
Okay. There is an interesting question. So like Drew is saying, so I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read the entire question. So sorry for such a broad question, but I'm struggling with trying to understand the AI as a material rather than a tool. I don't know whether the reason I can see AI as a material is because of how it was introduced to me, but it is there a perspective or resource you would recommend to help understand what it means to use AI as a material?
Yeah, so I think this might be a language difference. So I think we would all agree that like paper is a material, ink is a material, wood, plastic, metal, right? The things you play with in the shop and the studio. But I would also say something like music is a material, film is a material, right? I have a range of ways of telling stories using this medium. Wood has a set of capabilities, and there are things it's amazingly good at and things that it's terrible at. AI is very similar. It's not really a tool. The tool is more what we use to shape AI in the way like a saw shapes wood. But AI itself, data, and the inferences I draw out of data is fundamentally a material in the way that designers think about it. And it's learning to think and recognize data and to gain that felt understanding of that space of possibility. Data like this is just going to open these kinds of doors, and it's going to have these kinds of dangers in the same way we think about wood, right? Wood expands, it contracts, it holds moisture in super frustrating ways. It's flammable, right? It doesn't work in high heat. It's not airtight, but it's amazing for where you need it. But can you become expert at understanding where it adds value? And I think we kind of need craft people too. And maybe the AI engineers really are like the crafts people who are blowing glass, right? But that's very different than the designer who has more on putting components together. And I think for any individual student, finding the role within this larger network of roles that you like the most. Maybe it's more concept or creating scenarios about use, right? That's kind of almost a more filmmaking, sketching, we call it sketching with narrative, thinking about the stories of human experience. Some might be much more technical, some might be much more on that business boundary. Find the aspect of the work that you love to do and makes you want to go to work every day. That's the joy of design.
Okay, I'm gonna take maybe the two last questions because we're running out of time. So we have more than those, but let's say I'm gonna take the responsibility of moderating the Q&A panel. So it's like Karin is asking which AI capabilities are most important for designers to understand.
I don't think that it's a which. Like, they're all important. So the context you're working on matters. To me, it's less the capabilities and more this felt understanding. So I'll just use an example from healthcare. There's been a ton of work you may have seen about people trying to use AI to help doctors diagnose things, right? And it seems on the surface, great idea. But when you have a more material understanding of AI, you're like, that's absolutely stupid. AI learns from frequent patterns. So what it will be exceptionally good at are textbook cases. Do doctors need help with textbook cases? AI is not good at edge cases because there's very little data there and it overfits to the textbook case. That's where the doctors need help. That's not where AI is going to help. So gaining like a more felt sense that you sort of recognize, like, that's really not AI's superpower. It's not like this technique or that technique. It's just more a general understanding, like that middle median is where AI is always going to perform the best. Are you seeing an opportunity there, or are people trying to use it smartly when that's just not what it is? So to me, it's more being sensitive to the mundane and repetitive. That's AI's superpower, but we tend not to pay attention to it.
I'll go with this last one. So, okay, so where do you see, this is interesting, so the future of design and designers within the next 5 years, considering how AI will be advancing?
I don't know, and I would, but I'll give like maybe a longer answer. There was we had a nice retrospective of a designer here at our museum recently, and he started his career as a silversmith, so making one-off things for very wealthy patrons. And then industrialization happened. And then he started making designs for factories to be sold in department stores, early department stores. But then that wasn't enough. Then he had to do packaging. And then like as soon as you become good at something, design shifts. Like that's not enough. We need to do more than we were doing before once everybody can do it because there's no competitive advantage. So like over my career in design, what I can say is the constant is that what you do will be different than what you used to do. And that you want to, like, for those that are comfortable with the constant change and the constant learning, you're going to be much more fulfilled with the career in design than maybe a craftsperson who's looking for that kind of consistency. We just, like, AI is moving too fast. I do proposals that are 5 years, but I understand, like, I don't even know what a computer is going to be in 18 months. Right? The pace of change is incredible. NeurIPS had 30,000 paper submissions this year. There's just an inhuman amount of innovation happening on AI. There's just no way for us to know. So I think instead of focusing on where are we going, are you fluid with where we are? And are you open to that? That change is actually more important.
That's a very great answer, in my opinion. So this idea of being fluid with where you are, what you have right now, it's really a cool way of framing it. So thank you for that. Really interesting. Ah, ah.
This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, exactly. So that's for real. But we still tend to be more preoccupied about the future than focusing on what we have right now
Yeah.
and deal with that. But again, so there is probably a lot of materials available for more than one other Zoom session. So maybe that's sort of invitation to maybe welcome you again in the
Yeah.
near future. That will be super fun. And for the time being, let me thank you once again. So it was a pleasure to see you again and to have you with us for the first time in this case. As I was saying, I hope there are going to be chances in the future to do some other collaboration or masterclass.
That'd be great.
That would be great. It's also on our side. And so thank you so much, also invite students to follow your work. I mean, on social medias and the digital library of ACM. We're gonna find plenty of, let's say, stuff to deal with for more EDH or, for things for more, let's say, explorations of the domain, AI, design, SCI, and so on and so forth. And yeah, thank you so much for real for being with us and talk soon, I hope.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye. Bye-bye.